Good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Eric Nelson. I'm the Natrona County Attorney. I have to say I wasn't planning on standing before you this afternoon. Megan Nelms, who has been recently hired on as our senior planner, was planning on presenting to you and kind of guiding this listening session. Unfortunately, she's unable to be with us this afternoon, and so I'm gonna fill in for her. I'll say that last year in 2020, we kept saying, gosh, we can't wait till 2021 gets here so we can be through all this, and it just, the hits keep coming. Of course, we didn't anticipate that we'd be getting hit with a snowstorm today, and so I understand that the Casper Mountain Road is closed, and I'm sure that's why a lot of our mountain residents are unable to join us today. But we decided to go ahead because we knew there'd be some attendees and go ahead and have the session. It's going to be streamed on YouTube, and I believe will be accessible from a recorded standpoint. Some concern about wanting to reschedule this. I would just say that I think that the county is very committed to having a full process, and we do have another town hall type meetings scheduled for the 20th, and after that, if we feel we need to meet again, hopefully with better weather, we'll certainly do that. So there's no plans on shortcutting the process here. We want to hear from the public. We want your input, and we want to come out on the back end of this with a good updated Casper Mountain land use plan. So I'm going to walk through just a couple of slides here that Megan put together to kind of outline the process, and then I think what we'll probably do is turn it over to you all here in attendance. We want to hear from you on the process, and for those not in attendance, I'll give you a website address on the county website where you can submit comments electronically so that we can get your feedback as well. So just a little bit of background. The first Casper Mountain Land Use Plan that we're aware of was created and adopted in 1984. This was revised in 2004, so about 20 years after it was written, and that's, I believe, the one that is currently in place. And so we're about 17 years out, so it's definitely time to revisit the Mountain Land Use Plan. And really what this is what we'd call a visioning document for the community. And some questions I think that we want to hear from you all on are, how do we want to see the mountain developed? How do we maintain historical uses? And what types of uses should be allowed on the mountain? And finally, how do we manage resources available on the mountain? So certainly not an exhaustive list of questions and items to think about, but certainly important questions. Now, it's important, I think, that over the last year, it's became apparent that there is a little bit of a misunderstanding on what this plan is and what it isn't. So the plan is not a regulation or a rule. It doesn't carry the weight of law. But it is intended to guide decision makers when they adopt new rules. So back in 2004, for instance, when that Casper Mountain Land Use Plan was adopted, concurrently with the adoption of it, there were additions to the zoning resolution, creating the MR1, MR2 zoning districts and the various overlay districts. And so I would imagine at the end of this, if we come out with some specific things, then we'll be incorporating those changes into the zoning resolution rewrite that is actually ongoing concurrently, which by way of background is part of the reason why we wanted to do this now, so that we can get through this land use plan process and then be able to incorporate any changes into the new zoning resolution. And what the Casper Mountain Land Use Plan is really an amendment to the county land use plan, which guides planning throughout the county and is, I believe, mandated in statute. So it's really, I think, important to think of this as a community plan, and that we have all stakeholders of Casper Mountain involved in the development of the plan. I think what staff and what the county does not want to do is for us to just adopt something and kind of decree it from on high. This should be something that the community is involved in, that you all drive. It's going to be developed based on input and feedback from the community. And this is going to include, obviously, the mountain residents. And I think as we've seen over the last probably decade plus, the recreational use and other uses on the mountain have increased. So there's going to be other stakeholders as well. So we want to, hear from everybody. And as we move forward through this process, there's a lot of different methods of collecting this community input. There's surveys, there's listening sessions like today, an open house like we're going to have on the 20th. There'll be materials online, including maps and GIS, and then the specific plan website. So initially, we're looking at an approximately 6-month process to develop the plan. And you can see on the slide, September, October of 2021, kickoff meetings, a public open house, first questionnaire will be sent out. Then from November to December of 2021, we'll have a draft plan development. We'll have a second open house, a second questionnaire, and review by Planning and Zoning and the Board of County Commissioners. And then in January and February of 2022, final plan development and public adoption hearings. Now, I know there's been some concern that I've heard that this is a fairly expedited process, and again, part of the reason for trying to get it done in this 6 months is to get those changes then incorporated into the zoning resolution rewrite. But I can tell you, I think that as we work through this, if we realize we need to amend these timelines a little bit and push it out further, I can't speak for the commission specifically or the Planning and Zoning Commission specifically, but I believe that they would be amenable to pushing that out. We don't want to rush through this and have a subpar outcome. So today, candidly, initially this wasn't really planned. The 20th was going to be our first kind of public open house, but we heard from the community that we needed to have more opportunities for direct interaction. And so the thought behind today was to really get some input from you all, the community, on the process itself. We're not going to be making any decisions today. We're going to, as I just did, we outlined the process, and we want to gather your input. Specifically, what are the important topics that we should include in the plan? Folks that use the mountain or live on the mountain are going to know what those issues are better than we are down here in the courthouse. And so if there's something that you think is important that's not on our radar, we need to know that. If you have different ideas for how we should move through this process, we want to hear that. We want to ensure that all voices are heard and included in the updated document. For instance, the plan now is to not necessarily have a steering committee per se. Like for the zoning resolution rewrite, we do have a steering committee that's comprised of both staff and community members, but for this, we don't have that. And so if that's something that the community feels very strongly about, we want to hear that, and we'll take that to heart. How can we ensure that all voices are heard and included? And again, we're going to have residents, we're going to have users of the mountain, so how do we balance those competing interests so that we can have the best outcome for the community? So again, I've touched on a lot of this, but the planned kickoff meeting will be October 20th. 5:30 p.m. up at the Hogadon Ski Lodge. We've got that lodge blocked out for a couple hours. That'll be more of I believe Logan Simpson will be here. They'll kind of run the show on that, and it'll be more interactive, and I think we'll be diving a little more into the substance of the rewrite there. Again, they'll give probably an overview of the development process, and we'll release the first community survey and gather more input. And as we go through this process, input at any point in time is not only welcomed but encouraged. I don't think we've got this on a slide, do we? No, we don't. But the website that we have, or I guess the email we have up is CMLUP, so Casper Mountain Land Use Plan, CMLUP at natronacounty-wy.gov. So for those folks that are unable to join us here today, feel free to submit any comments, ideas, concerns to that email address, and we'll be sure to include it in the process. Also on the county website, natronacounty-wy.gov /CMLUP, and that's where you'll find additional materials on the process. I believe the current mountain land use plan is posted there, and we've received the 1984 one in a PDF, so that'll be posted probably here shortly in the next day or two, so you can kind of look at kind of the historical progression and the way things were done in the past. And so with that pretty much kind of brings to an end, I guess, my comments or prepared comments such as they are. I think what our intention now is to basically have me sit down, spin the podium around, and invite you all to approach the podium with any comments that you might have, questions. If we can answer them, we certainly will. I'd ask, we don't have a huge crowd, but I'd ask, keep them as short as you can, but we won't, I think, put any time limits on things unless we really start to go long, but we've got some time, so not too concerned about that. And with that, I'd invite the public to come on up.
Well, I'll begin by just saying I'm very nervous, and this is not a very comfortable thing to be. I guess I was expecting to see more people here that maybe we could talk about some things. I am a property owner on the mountain and have been for several years. And
I'm sorry to interrupt, sir. So I forgot to mention, if you could just give your name.
Okay, my name is Jack Hyde.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hyde. Go ahead, please.
And I guess I've been, or am still a little confused about this whole process. A couple years back, there was a meeting here, and the county commissioners were here, and we came and we talked. And I know at that time there was a lot of discussion about, I know Jason had kind of developed the previous proposal of how things were going to go, and there was a big discussion about a illegal campground and all of those kind of things. And I think the thing I left the meeting was, that there would be an opportunity for people that own property on the mountain to maybe be involved in this process other than just coming here in a nervous situation and trying to express our feelings. That we would maybe be able to partake as part of the shareholders and so forth. And then the next thing I read about is that we've hired a firm from outside of Wyoming to put together the plan. Well, I'm not a big fan. We got people in Wyoming that are pretty smart, and I think they should be able to figure out what's best for us instead of hiring someone from outside the state to come in and dictate to us. I know at the previous meetings there was a lot of discussion about the plan will be that there's going to be some provisions to pay for some use if you're going to use it, that you can apply to get permits to use your own property, different kind of things. And I guess as a property owner on the mountain, and previous to that, a user of the mountain, and have good friends that are property owners and that do use the mountain, and I think that's great, and I think we're fortunate that we have Casper Mountain as close as we do. But I think with that being said, is the property owners, we pay taxes. And I would like for the mountain land use plan and whoever the drafters turn out to be or whatever, to keep in mind that we shouldn't be charged or penalized or double dipped and being allowed and someone telling me how I can use my property, whether I can park my camper there for 3 days or whether I got to be in it at 8 o'clock at night, or that's nobody's business but mine. As a property owner, that's my business. If I want to leave my camper up there and have the snow cave it in, if I pay for the camper, that's mine. I don't think we need overzealous involvement. I guess frankly, I've owned property on the mountain since the 2004 plan's been put in place, and it's worked pretty well. And I guess I'm maybe an old school guy, but I'm from the school that if it ain't broke, we don't need to fix it. And I think the current plan has served us well. I think it continues to serve us well. I haven't had anything that's impeded me from being able to do anything. I bought property up there. I applied for a permit to drill a well, went through the permitting process. I added a building. I went through the difficult process of getting a building permit from the county and so forth, and the bloodletting that goes on there, but that's okay. You know, it takes a certain amount of time, and we want to make sure we do it right, and we need people to provide oversight to us, and I did that, and we did when we followed those rules and regulations and so forth, and all that spelled, and I didn't do anything that was outside of the existing plan, and I don't think we've had any problems really. The only complaint I have heard about the county use plan was this one thing 2 years ago about a campground, and people throwing up their hands and ringing and so forth, and wringing their hands and saying, you know, what's going to become of us? And I think it was a little bit of a Chicken Little and the sky's falling type thing, and I think it was blown out of proportion, and I think maybe some of this is continuing. I did attend the hearing out, or the little meeting out at the fairgrounds where you got to go around and write your thing on a board. There was no discussion, there was no presentation, there was nothing, just go around and write on a board what you think. So I went and I wrote on every board. But I talked to one of the ladies that was there coordinating that, and she said, we're not from here. The county commissioners have hired us. We're from, I believe they told me, Colorado, but I'm old, my memory may not be that good.
That's right.
But she said, and we're going to tell you how to run this. We don't really care what you think. And the county commissioners have put their faith in us, and they know we know what we're doing, and we do know what we're doing, and we really don't care about the input. And I was disappointed with that, but I went ahead about my business and so forth. And so, like I said, I think there's still, I don't know that we need to hurry. I would rather see this done right as done quickly. Just hurrying through isn't going to necessarily end up with the best result. And I think we want to keep focused that we want to do what's best for everyone, and especially for our mountain. Because if we don't do it right, we're going to have a mess on our hands. So I would just encourage you to take into consideration some of the stakeholders' concerns in this, which I'm not convinced that has been done. And I mean, today, the mountain's closed. We can't reschedule a meeting because the people on the mountain can't even get down here to do this. A lot of people that live on the mountain, I don't have very good internet at my cabin. Mm-hmm. And so going on to and I'm not very computer literate, so going on and saying everything's available PDF or VIP or whatever it is, I don't understand all that kind of stuff. So I think it's best to have, and I'm old school, I think it's best to talk to people face to face, eyeball to eyeball, and let them have their input. And I think where we're missing the boat is not having people that own property on the mountain on this planning committee that's deciding what's going to be done and not be done. I'm not saying they need to comprise it all, but I think they need to be represented. So thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hyde. And I won't plan on kind of responding to every comment, but just so that we're clear, you know, there are two rewrites going on right now. One is the zoning resolution rewrite, and that covers the entire county. And I think when you referenced the whiteboards and stuff, that's that process. I would say the county has contracted with Logan Simpson They are I think, very well-respected firm that does a lot of this type of work, but at the end of the day, it is going to be our county plan, and the way I view their role is to tell us kind of what is kind of gold standard and to guide us through that process, but ultimately, we're going to have to make those decisions here locally, and that's where I think, speaking for the Planning and Zoning Commission, the county commissioners, we need your input. Secondly, I remember all too well the meetings 2 years ago about campgrounds. Hard to forget. And what I would say is at the end of this, it may be that we find that the current plan is working pretty well. And I don't know that the intent is to throw it out, the baby out with the bathwater and start from scratch. But as we work through certain aspects of the mountain land use plan, we find that, maybe things aren't as clearly worded, or in the zoning resolution that there's some internal inconsistencies. And so maybe it's just a matter of cleaning up the language and making it clear. So, we're going to go, I think, into this with an open mind. Also, Mr. Ed, what I heard is that, being able to contribute to the process outside of a meeting like this, so that really speaks to me to more of a steering committee approach, working committee approach where we have community members part of that. So I don't know that I can address every point you made, but we certainly thank you for your comments, and thanks for coming down here today. I'd invite anyone else up next.
Katie Lejeski. The biggest thing we need to really look at is infrastructure. We found that through the last 9 months of the newest subdivision up there, that we have a problem with infrastructure. Our roads are unmarked, unlabeled, not connected to others. So getting around, you end up at a dead end. We have to have a way off that mountain in a case of an emergency. The other issue is when a new subdivision goes on up there and gets approved, we need to look at the fire exits from the previous subdivision connecting to a new subdivision. So it is a flow of traffic. To hit something that was there before and it's gone now in a new subdivision. Water and sewer. Our water resources are drying up. Can't say that today. It's running rapid. But our water is going to dry up. We need to look at how many wells we're drilling, how many septic systems are going in, where they're going in. There is water up there, but it flows downhill into the river. How much of that sewer is going to go into our springs or into the North Platte? Those are two big issues that I have with developing on the mountain. We don't want to overdevelop, overuse, create bigger problems than we already have up there. And that's all I have. I'll leave it to Andrew, who has more.
I'm already amped up, thank you. Oh, yeah. Well, you all have already heard quite a bit from me, I think, and I'll refer you to my testimony before the last Planning and Zoning Committee meeting when I was really focused and I've had my whole soapbox prepared and my notes in front of me. I wasn't really aware of what the agenda was going to be today, so I don't really have that many thoughts. But just in responding to your presentation, Eric, there are a couple things that I didn't bring up last time that I wanted to bring up this time, and one is tying through to the Visit Casper strategic plan, which has a goal area for the mountain, and just making sure that we're not in separate silos from the planning work going on over there. So how can we bring everyone under one big tent and make sure that the plan represents both the resident voices and the user group voices? And the specific idea that I wanted to pull out from that group is thinking about the Wyoming State Parks and Trails and having them be involved. They have some different studies and some different ideas about their piece of this, the snowmobile trails and other things. Another question that's come up and is the water resource going forward on the mountain. And there's been a lot of back and forthing, and I'm not a water scientist, so I'm not here to tell you what the situation is, but there is a UW study in the last, I think, 5 or 6 years that we should definitely be consulting regarding the watershed and surface water. And I wanted to bring up, I guess my question would be, is there a study that shows that the mountain water resource can support the density that the current plan suggests, which is 1 dwelling unit, 1 well, and 1 septic per 5 acres? I've not seen a study that says that the actual groundwater will actually support that. So in Wyoming, our water law can be summarized in 2 pages. It's kind of old school. And we don't have adjudication of wells for residential only purposes. You tend to have an ag use, or the state doesn't want to adjudicate. But we could wind up in a situation where a water resource doesn't support the density that's there. And so I would suggest looking at some sort of study to be commissioned or found if it exists. And then thinking about other stakeholders to involve, just point you to the 2004 plan. The very first page behind the cover is a list of, I don't know, maybe 50 different people and organizations that were involved. And I don't see any engagement of these folks in this planning process. So that's kind of a red flag for me. And I would want to make sure that all these agencies, including the Casper Mountain Fire Protection District, but also the state, we've adopted, building codes, and our building inspector would be a great person to get involved in this. When we talk about subdivision design and those types of ingress and egress issues, having people who've read the international building codes we've adopted and the fire plan codes that we've adopted. So those are sort of the studies and plans that I think we should be trying to involve. Then, Eric, your other question here was, how do we ensure that all voices are heard and included in the updated document? I like some of the ideas that have been floated. Maybe some of these happened before the meeting formally started, so I'll just bring them back up. But maybe having a mulligan on today sometime in November for folks who couldn't participate, and then, extending this process. And just to talk about extending this process, in the 2004 plan, the first section includes a planning process, and from January to March was the timeline for the first draft. So here we're doing that in 2 months versus over a whole quarter. And then I think they went on another 4 or 6 months to actually get the whole thing done. So it was less than a year, but it wasn't quite 6 months. Going back to the original plan, that started, this process I actually think had way better engagement, more people involved. They started in August of 1983. They formed a steering committee. By late 1983, they put out their first survey to the residents and the general population. Then it wasn't until January of '84 that they put out a newsletter detailing the survey results and inviting people to 3 workshops in 1984. And that was those workshops in 1984 really allowed people to drill into these specific topics that the survey had brought up. And then in May of 1984, so February to May, they digested the open house data and drafted. And then from May they had a final open house in June, and then the plan was adopted in August. While that was going on, there was a moratorium so that Megan and Holly and Tiffany aren't getting bombarded with people trying to slam in subdivision and zone change and all other kinds of applications before the next plan comes in. So I would recommend looking at adopting some sort of moratorium into the process. And then finally, the other thing that kind of feels missing from this process to me is here in the plan components. It also says, so we have an inventory analysis. I'm not seeing a new inventory analysis being done. Maybe that is part of Logan Simpson's scope, but an update of what has changed. And that can really help us in terms of we don't know what the real names of all the roads are that have been adopted. We don't know where the records of some of those roads are, and we'd like to try and find those. We don't have consistent signage with the names of parks. So you drive up the mountain and it says now entering Casper Mountain Park. Well, that name hasn't really been used since the last plan was updated. So inventory analysis is there, gut checking the goals and policies. Could be that goals and policies are pretty much spot on, but then there's other elements that need done. And the land use plan, that's all self-explanatory. But the two pieces that relate to how do we make sure everyone has a voice in this are the facility services and resource management plan, and then the land use implementation plan. So there's an opportunity here. I don't think the last two plans ever really had a great resource management plan follow-up. So we spent a lot of money making these resource management plans. KLM was the consultant that did the last one, and that plan hardly ever gets referenced in parks or zoning, anywhere. So let's bring that forward into this process and take a look at whether anything needs to change on the resource management plan. And then on the implementation plan, land use implementation, I think if we're going to update these plans every 20 years and the pace of change is kind of accelerating, that we need some sort of infrastructure, whether that's an annual, biannual steering committee that just shepherds this plan from commission to commission. Right, we have an election or a change in the commissioners every 4 years, and if the voters see fit to change the commissioners, but the plan then lives 20 years. So I feel like the commissioners have some frustration, perhaps, as well as the planning and zoning board, that there's no follow through on that. So every 4 years they're trying to reinvent the wheel on these things, whereas if this plan was a living document with a steering committee, maybe meeting every 6 months or a year, and then doing a more formal 5-year update so that if anything needs changed on a 5-year basis, we have an opportunity to do that. And I think that's consistent with best planning practices that you'll see in a lot of communities. So with that, and with the addition of the input that I gave at the last planning and zoning meeting, I will happy to stand for any questions. So, yeah.
No, Mr. Schneider, I don't have any questions. I don't hear any. We certainly appreciate your input. It's always very well thought out and insightful. I think you have some really good comments. I think we'll probably reach back with Logan Simpson. I have to imagine that some of these will be addressed, or they're going to be addressing them through the meeting on the 20th. One thing I did want to mention is, and you probably know this as well as anyone, the Firewise program and the status of that on the mountain. Our understanding is that some of that funding has gone away, and there's been kind of a pause right now. And so part of the zoning resolution rewrite that we're working on is actually incorporating some of those standards into the zoning resolution. So it's not merely a guidance, but would carry the force of law. And actually, Logan Simpson has been pretty helpful with that because they've done a lot of that down in Colorado, and so hopefully we can get kind of the gold standard stuff there. We're also, through our building department, looking at ways, and we'll be coming to the commissioners as to how the county can play a more active role and maybe spearhead the Firewise program. I think that you know what, we've seen with some of the overlays and some of the stuff in the current mountain land use plan, and it may not have been clearly incorporated into the zoning, and we want to have the ability going forward to enforce some of this stuff, because certainly, probably not today, but for most of the summer, fire is a huge concern for the mountain residents. So I know that's of particular interest to you, so I wanted to mention that, but great information, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree that the fire is an important piece, and it's interesting that in the 1984 plan, that's the first time that we have a document that says an east face and a west face ingress and egress are really necessary, and that the county and the state have a role to play in that. So there are some opportunities, and there's correspondence that I can bring back up from the last year of kind of having conversations about that. So yeah, I would encourage us to just, slow down to get a little farther. And I understand that, we want to get the zoning stuff done in the scope we've set out with the consultants, but I just warn against putting the rules and regs first and then the community plan second, because that's backwards from what statute and constitution and good democratic American principles would have us do. Thank you both.
Hi, my name's Mary Minihan, and I didn't really come prepared to speak because I read that this was going to be a hearing, and I thought I was going to come and hear about the plan and what the next steps were, and then we could comment at the October 20th meeting. But I've been an owner up there for about 15 years, and my area is actually in a subdivision. So any changes made to the plan or the county rules and regs will then affect our covenants, and our board will have to, and homeowners will all have to review our covenants and possibly rewrite and incur that expense and all. So I think that ought to be considered when a new plan is developed. I bought up there following and assuming the land use plan and the rules in effect at that time. I hope nothing goes away that was a reason I bought to degrade anything. Just in our area alone, in recent sales, we've discovered unknown septic systems that have been put in over the years. Things like that scare adjacent owners when they're found. So I think the county needs to be willing, under a new plan, under their new regs, to maybe step up their services to the mountain owners, to have enough staff to follow up on the building permits, septics, along with the county health. This summer, it was very apparent that our services up there are being reduced. We pay more in taxes, but we have no water source, especially in the event of a fire. There's more users on the mountain, more emergencies. Our area at one point tried to improve our roads. For emergency access, we've had to have helicopters fly in and land. We've had ambulances get into the area. We offered to pay for all the rock hauling, labor involved to improve roads. And these are not our private subdivision roads. These are what are considered public use roads up there. And that was at the time when there was the big pile of rock going up East End Road, and the county denied us access to any of that rock to put on the public use roads. So I think a plan might want to work better between the county and the owners up there. Another thing, in working with Jason over the years, the plan should have very clear definitions Words are used interchangeably and don't match up between the plan and the county regs. And just one comment that I see up there is the people that come to these meetings and want to serve on steering committees and have input, they're the good owners. They respect their private property rights, they follow the rules. It's a lot of the other owners that you won't hear from. And the rules and this plan need to apply to them and be able to be enforceable. I thank you for your time.
Anyone else wishing to make comments? Questions?
Good afternoon, Eric. My name is John Cornquin. I'm a landowner on Casper Mountain. I'm a managing member of Bottom Rock LLC. We have a bunch of properties up there. I would like to speak to the land use plan. I appreciate you reminding everybody this is a guide. It's not the rules and regulations. It's just a guide of what we want as a community of owners up there and as a community around, that this is just a guide. I would say one of the things, as a realtor for 29 years here in Casper, and I've sold many properties on Casper Mountain. It's been a focus of mine. Access is probably one of the biggest issues we have on Casper Mountain, besides fire. But it's access. These big ranches, the old SP ranch, everybody got a 40 acres from as a kid or whoever, the grandkids, and it was all a handshake. Everybody got to use the roads, and once those sold, the new owners were trying to close off those properties. And so as a realtor, we have to deal with it all the time, and we're trying to get access that was improperly given. Mrs. Forsling was selling a lot of properties over there by Crimson Dawn, and was giving access in the deeds, but they're not specifically described. So now I'm in the process of helping landowners get access and get it surveyed and get everybody signed through there so that everybody can have access. You'll find that in many areas of the mountain, and I think that's the number one issue on the mountain. And I don't know how this plan can help, but I would love to see the county provide some financing or something like that to help the landowners accomplish this problem, because it helps the values of the mountain, which will help the tax rolls for Casper, for Natrona County. So that's a number one big thing. It's been talked about water. Water is a funny thing on Casper Mountain. There's not much of it on the east end, and there's quite a bit of it on the west end. And so sometimes we describe the issues of mountain water as a whole, and it's actually, it's just different. I own properties on both sides of the mountain, and you disclose when you sell properties that you don't have, probably won't get water. And if you drill a well, it's might not be likely that you get water. And so you disclose. And I think, so most people have cisterns on that east end of the mountain, and that works for them. Unfortunately, the county has taken away the water fill station, so it's more cumbersome for people to have water. I think that should be a focus, and I've heard many varying reasons why we haven't replaced that, and it usually has to do with regulations with the DEQ or something. I'm not sure if it's accurate, but people just need water. It's not always potable water, they just need water. And I think the county could step up its efforts in that. I think there's an opportunity to work with landowners to put maybe some tanks up on different ends of the mountain where there is water, as well as the water fill station. Maybe put something over by Archery Range Park. I own next to that park, and I live in fear because we have a great valley, and I do know that people don't always put water out or their fires out, and one of the big reasons is they don't have water. And so if we would work with maybe the landowners that do have water in that area, i.e. me, we might be able to work out something where it might be solve some of these safety issues. Another issue that we have on Casper Mountain is the recreational portions of things. Snowmobiling is a great pastime for people, and they've used the trails for many years, but there's no access. And so new owners are threatening to cut off the access, and they have full rights to do such. I think the county needs to work with the landowners, with the state, and continue to provide that ability for people to use snowmobiling. But it's not a inherent right for them to go across private properties, and I think that's an error when we think that. And I've heard at least one of the county commissioners describe it as such, that they need to protect that, and it's not a protected class. It's an opportunity for people to enjoy recreation, and I'm fully for it, but I just want to make sure that people realize it's not a right because they've been trespassing for many years to continue to trespass. Let's see what else we can talk about. As a realtor that sells a lot of real estate up on the mountain, I can say that it's in great demand. Prices have been going up. There's a need for more lots. I don't think that we need smaller lots. I think that, but there needs to be properties available for the public. And it's not just out-of-state people coming, it's local people that are looking to recreate on the mountain. Casper Mountain is different than many mountains. It's mostly private. The state and the BLM lands are far to the south and the west and the east. The big chunk of what we use is all private. So we have to work together on this, and I am against a moratorium on development. As Mary said, she bought her property under a plan, and my company has bought properties under the plan with the idea that we were going to provide some excellent opportunities for people to own on Casper Mountain. And that's what we intend on doing. And it's not slipping in a new subdivision, as my friend Andrew might think. It's using what we bought under, and that's the plan to the 2004 plan. And actually, it's just a guide. We have to say it's a guide. And so my intention is to continue to provide these great opportunities for people to own on Casper Mountain. I've been proud of what we've been able to do in the past and want to continue that. And I love ideas on how to make a development better for the people that are using the lands up on Casper Mountain. But once again, it's a private property, and we want to make sure we can exercise our rights fully. Let's see, I appreciate you guys having these opportunities for us to speak as landowners, as people in the community, and I really encourage you to do more of them. I fortunately read on the Casper Mountain Landowner website that there was this meeting going on, so I slipped up here. So I think once it's brought back to their attention, there's going to be more people that want to be involved. And I think it's a good thing to hear different ideas, different suggestions. But this is just a plan. It's not our rules and regulations, and I want to continue to work under the rules and regulations that we have, and not be shot down in my investments by a moratorium for some unknown length of time. Thank you. Any questions for me?
No, I don't have any.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
I do have couple, or just one question, actually, but it may mean you have to talk for a little bit more. Being a realtor and you're working with new owners up there and selling property, the current plan that we have right now, is there anything that just jumps out at you right now that does not work?
The great question people have when they buy vacant land is, can I put a trailer on, or a camper on there? And, you know, I just want to recreate on it. I want a place to hide out. I think the COVID scare that we've had has emphasized that. And so people want direction. Can I do this? And we always direct them to the county because it's a little bit ambiguous, I think, on if we can, because it's for a year or a season, and there's arguing, oh, I use it during the winter season, and you know, and those arguments have been there. So that's one of the questions, and just the clarity that others have brought up that I think that is important to the public is, give us the rules and we'll follow them. You know, it's such, we don't want to, you know, try bending everything. That there's no, I would look at if we want any sort of commercial property on Casper Mountain, or at least the availability of it. There's one property besides Hogadon that is, we have Sunburst Lodge, and they're kind of doing a different thing there, lodging, but there's the cafe on the old Treetop Cafe. That's the only commercial property on Casper Mountain, and there's a great need for something up there. You know, I own it, so, you know, and I hope somebody would buy it and turn it into something. But, you know, there's a great need for something up there, and not just this one. There used to be other places up there by the sledding hill, and I'm not looking for Walmart, but something to service the people that live up there. I think I would look at that because we don't have that really availability. I'm not sure if we really do within our zoning up there. But other than that, the fire issue is a big one. The resources to help people clean up their properties that maybe don't have they might be aged and don't have the money to clean up their property, because there's quite a bit over there on the east end of the mountain that still needs to be logged and cleaned up. It's just a tinderbox waiting to be struck. And so I think some of that would be a big part of it. The accesses that I already talked about, and I think people have talked about the roads in general. There's been a great increase in tax revenues the county's received from the Casper Mountain, because they really focused on vacant land that we don't feel like it's been put back into our living. It's been put into the county, but not necessarily to better the roads up there. And I think that'd be good for everybody, because it's changing. It used to be a rustic, and some people want to be rustic, but the mountain has been changing over the years, and more year-round residences are up there, people wanting that. And so they're expecting a little bit more on the roads. And that's just a different kind of buyers that are out there now. Maybe just people don't want to just always camp out. But I'm not sure if I answered it all, but I can talk.
No, that was good, thank you.
Okay.
So the only thing I would add, and you please sit down, but with regard to, you know, the camping, I mean, this came up 2 years ago, and when I took a look at the zoning resolution, there was a lot of internal inconsistencies. And so when you look at case law, when there's an ambiguity in a zoning resolution, you have to construe that in favor of the full use of the private property. And I think it became very apparent at the time that there was a very stark divide among the community as to what extent should we be allowing that type of use with you know, RVs and no permanent residence. And so part of that's going to be addressed in the zoning resolution rewrite. We do have a steering committee on that, and we've gotten through kind of the module 1. We've got a draft, and we're going to be trying to address camping basically throughout the county. But as we look at Casper Mountain in particular, and I think this is to Mr. Schneider's point, we need to have the land use plan done to guide the zoning as it pertains to the mountain. So I would encourage you, if you're interested in this process, to try to plug in, and I'm sure we've got some stuff online too on the zoning rewrite, because there's, as I hear these comments, we talk about roads and ingress, egress, and fire. There's not one document or one process that's going to be the silver bullet to solve all these problems, and so it'll be tackled in numerous different ways. So please be plugged into all those processes. We want to hear from you.
Hello, my name is Debbie Bean. I'm from here in Casper. I want to address the comment you just made about some questions on the campground there on East End Road. A lot of us read the mountain use plan, and it very clearly said that was mountain residential. So I don't know why there was any issue. A lot of us read Neil Forsling's will, which prohibited any tourist camps, meaning campgrounds in modern-day language, on any of her property sold in the future. But it was allowed anyway. So a lot of us didn't understand when it was written out in black and white why it was allowed. Another thing about the meeting today, a lot of folks from the mountain would have been here. The room would have been packed. A lot of those folks do work. And in the middle of the afternoon, it's very inconvenient for them to have their input, which they very much would like to do. So maybe getting a later time for these kinds of meetings would be a good deal for them. And one question for the gentleman that was just up here. I heard him mention some issues in the Crimson Dawn area, and I think he referenced Neil Forsling and her wishes in that area, and I'd like to maybe hear a little bit more about those concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bean. Just to reiterate, I'm not. There will be another meeting on the 20th up at Hogadon from 5:30 to 7:30. So hopefully that'll accommodate the evening hours. We acknowledge that the weather is going to prohibit a lot of folks from attending today. So we'll be looking at needing, if we need to add another meeting after the 20th to make sure that those voices are heard. Also, for folks with internet connectivity, there is a website where they can submit written comments. And I'm just going through my notes here, and I think the issue that was referenced on the Forsling property had to do with dedication of public roads. And so over time, there may have been agreements between landowners to allow public usage of a road, and perhaps, and I'm just talking in generalities here, a specific road may not have been properly dedicated, and so then the land gets sold, changes hands, and then you don't have that nice, neat chain of title on the roadway. And so I think the Mountain Land Use Plan can certainly identify and address some of those issues, but the roadway issue is something we're aware of, and the county will have to develop a plan to tackle that as well. So
To further that, so some property was bought up there. Part of that property had a road on it. It was formerly Forsling's property. And in that deed that was issued to the landowner, it said that road must always be available for ingress and egress. So seeing that was so long ago, is that something that those people don't have to take into consideration because things change? It doesn't have to be handed down from, landowner to landowner.
So Ms. Bean, so that gets a little bit complicated when we're talking about specific cases. Wyoming statute does require, when you're going to set out a perpetual easement, that you describe it in meets and bounds. So what you find in a lot of the older deeds is they just would make a blanket kind of dedication, and it's not specifically called out in meets and bounds, and so then there's some legal questions as to the enforceability. And so I mean, that's beyond the scope of what I can really address here today. But I think from the county's perspective, as we look at public roads and trying to ascertain whether they've been properly dedicated. Those are the types of things we just have to look at on a case-by-case basis. And then, of course, if it's private property, then that's something the buyer or seller is going to have to look at. So I guess I would acknowledge, I mean, that is definitely
Yeah.
the issue, but
Who would I be able to visit with that would know if that clause is still lawfully upheld as written on a deed?
well, if it's private property, that you probably have to consult with a private attorney. I mean, if it's a county road, then, that's something that we would look at here at the
Yeah.
county.
No, it's just a road that is encompassed in a piece of property people bought,
Yeah.
and that included that road, but on the deed, it was formerly Forsling's, and at the bottom, she had put her wishes, and so they're thinking, well, do we have to abide by this? It's our private road because we own,
Yeah, that would be, a private legal matter, so that, probably consulting with a private attorney.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have comments, questions, any input? See, we've been joined by our friends from the health department. If they want to. Hi. Going once, going twice. Okay, well, thank you all for coming down. I know the weather's not the greatest. This again will be just the start of the process. Please mark on your calendar the 20th, 5:30 at Hogadon. We'll have another community meeting then, and please check our website for any updates. Thank you.